for FF14 is going to be worth sticking around for. Give us a call. Limit Break Radio on Skype, 810-515-8715, limitbreakradio.com. Kala, what do you need to hear from Square Enix?
Oh, all right. See, I don't know if I can just judge mine based on what ends up coming out of FanFest. Obviously, you know, that's sort of where you get your sort of early indicators from, but I probably will actually wait for the expansion proper to drop, because the two big things on my list, the first is it cannot, again, for the third expansion in a row, seem like to me that we are getting less content or less developed stuff from them.
0 dungeons and then 1 dungeon every other patch.
I mean, look, it sounds ridiculous.
Losing a dungeon.
It sounds ridiculous when I say it, and when you actually think about it, like, okay, so what, 1 dungeon per patch? Like, it seems like, why would they sink that low? There's no way that they would turn to that. And look, I'm even going to point out that right now, going into patch 4.3 directly after Eureka, for the first time in a long time, it does actually seem like we are getting quite a bit of content compared to what we did. But there's a saying that perception is reality, right? So even if you have all types of awesome shit planned and your update's going to be super huge, if at the onset of an expansion I walk away going, is that it? Like nothing else is coming out, especially when you look at the way that Stormblood's launch was. It launched with the MSQ and there was the MSQ, wasn't there?
Well, I mean, that's what they do to give people time to level jobs before the normal mode and then Savage mode comes out.
Okay, but then how? But remember the next thing we got after Stormblood dropped? It was PvP. We had a PvP thing that was supposed to be our big content for a long period of time. So all I'm saying is that at FanFest, it cannot seem like we are getting less than what we've already been treated to, and I don't think that that's a very unfair ask. And also, by the way, Yoshi, please don't come out and say anything about how big your budget is. Just save yourself the headache and don't talk about the budget at all.
Oh, they really did themselves a disservice by talking about that they have a higher budget.
It was just a single comment that has haunted them to this day. But it has to seem like we're getting more content. It has to seem like you're putting in, or at least you have plans to put in more effort than you have this expansion. The other thing is, and this is the one that I can't actually tell until it actually comes out, but you need to fix your MSQ problem. I haven't given a shit about anything in this expansion whatsoever, and if you try and compare it to A Realm Reborn or even even Heaven's Ward, I feel like the story and the characters pale in comparison. My favorite quote from Yoshi P since FF14 launched under his leadership is how he talked about how he wanted to return to the roots of Final Fantasy, this darker sort of storytelling, right? I want to see that again. That's what I'm going to need to keep me invested.
Seen that since 2.55.
I'm
when
aware.
All the characters, quote unquote, died.
I'm well aware. And here's the thing. I'm actually at the point now, and this is the reason why I can't recall any of the characters or the endings of the MSQ, is that I was getting so bored watching the cutscenes that I started skipping through them. Like, I'm at the point where I'm skipping through the MSQ just so that I can see some of the content that's in it. And that's a fucking problem to someone who is spending like a half an hour reading through the fucking codex and lore entries in God of War because they're so fucking good.
That's a pretty good point. You know, I found it was weird. I found myself sucked into an Elder Scrolls hole. Like I was playing ESO for like 5 hours last night.
What sucked you in exactly?
I don't know. Like I was like, why do I even have this installed? And I think it was Ryoku had bought the one of the newer expansions.
Wasn't the Morrowind expansion?
It might have been. One? Yeah, I think it was. Anyway, he had got it for me, and I was like, well, I might as well just like plug some hours into it. And I mean, I you know, granted, I'm only like level 11 or 12 in that, but it feels both like an Elder Scrolls game and an MMO. And it's shocking to me how Final Fantasy XIV feels neither like a Final Fantasy game nor really like an MMO, which is quite a contrast to what I experienced on ESO. Granted, it's, you know, the exposure time is way different. I've been playing far more FF14 than I ever did ESO.
I think if you were fresh into 14 today, it would feel like both.
It's possible
because you don't know any better.
It's possible, but FF14 still takes you on a very guided journey. It's very on rails, even for the first 50 levels. and I don't necessarily feel like that's necessarily true of ESO. So, you know, like I do think that there's a sharp contrast to be drawn. And in a game like FF14 that relies so heavily on its narrative structure and on its narrative strength, I do think, Kahlo, you bring up a really good point that they can't slack on the story. And I think one of the really disservices that they did here was kind of splitting the story into two between Doma and Alamigo.
Although, having just said that, I do think at least you talked a little bit earlier how some of the efforts they've been making, you can at least applaud them a little bit for that, right?
Sure.
And looking at it just now, I think that maybe what their effort might have been is if we look back at Heavensward, one of our big complaints about the MSQ is that every single time it was focusing on a different aspect or a different storyline thread that we had dropped way back when, and it all just seemed so disjointed. Looking at Stormblood in that light, they are trying to stick just to two separate ones. But you're right. I don't think that that's enough, because it still has this sense of disjointedness to it. And
World of Warcraft Battle for Azeroth coming August 14. Please look forward to it.
I am. And I think that judging from just their pedigree, the Square Enix and Final Fantasy pedigree, they should be able to weave two storylines, even if they are continents away, into each other in something that's way more satisfying.
Hopefully.
Instead, they do feel really separate. Like, I feel like they're both should be in a similar position, right? They're both liberated. They're both reestablishing themselves. And yet we focus on one at a time. And
exactly.
I feel like while we're in Doma, Alamigo is in no less need for help than Doma was. I feel like it's actually in need of more help because it has less leaders than Doma had. And I mean, I kind of feel like we're just leaving Alamigo for the wolves right now. And I just don't think that in a real life situation, like, the diplomacy and the politics would be working this way. So it's kind of throwing me off that Alamigo is just like, yeah, we'll just do our thing over here while you do your thing over there.
No, I would have thought that by the end of the Stormblood expansion, the 4.0,
the original MSQ expansion story,
that they would have found a way to sort of conjoin the two conflicts into one, and so you wouldn't feel like you were pulled between the two different areas, and it would be one kind of cohesive storyline. They haven't done that at all, and it's like I feel like they've not even really made any steps more towards that. So it's like, okay, so maybe that'll happen at the end of the 4.0, like at 4.5 or 4.55. Is that what we're building to?
A giant orgy.
No,
Listen, I just don't think that's a great plot point to be building towards.
It depends what they do with Xenos at this point. I feel like originally when I was going into Stormblood, I assumed, and once they announced Doma, that it would be two separate conflicts that we would not liberate either of them until 4.5.
Yeah, but like that ship sailed, Nika. We have.
I know, but I just feel like I'm just trying to figure out what their frame of mind is, because once we liberated both of them in the original MSQ before we got any extra patches, now it just kind of feels like everything is trolling and lagging and like slowly moving, whereas instead we could have been in heated conflict and battle this entire time. But instead, we're like, no, here's a little bit of politics here and a little bit of politics there and a peace treaty here. And like, it doesn't feel like there's much urgency anymore, which I think at the beginning of Stormblood, I did feel, but I didn't realize we would be ending all of that by the end of the original MSQ. And so, I mean, and that part of my original issue with Heavensward as well, as that once we got to 3.3, we had killed Nidhogg and we were on to different things, which was also kind of weird. So, and a lot of people are saying this is going to be similar, and that with 4.3, we're going to end Doma and then move back to Ala Mhigo. And I was like, that still doesn't feel right to me. I don't know.
None of it is hanging together very well, and I realize we're right, kind of smack dab in the center of it. But you know, when your core audience is going, yeah, I don't know that this is. I don't see where the threads are connecting. That's not necessarily a good thing. And you know, and I've talked about this in the past. Part of you know what MMO storytelling, you know, one of the big challenges there is that you've got you know an entire quarter's worth of time, you know, 3 months or more between story injections, and it's almost impossible for anyone to kind of keep up with what the fuck is going on. And so I do think that it has a way, if you're trying to tell a bit more of a complex or nuanced storyline, it ends up feeling to the player that a big section in the middle is just faffing about. You know what I mean? Like, it's that's where I feel we are right now, and I'm hoping that maybe with future patches that it will, you know, we'll look back on what's going on right now and go, oh, that makes a little bit more sense. But I remember thinking that about the Dragon Song War as well, and we never got that kind of payoff.
Or the Syndicate, they're totally gonna come in and pay off soon, guys.
Oh my God! Or the Warriors of Darkness.
Warriors of Darkness.
Yeah,
like, I'm still really upset about that whole storyline. Like, we get to see, you know, Minfield comes back as the goddess's envoy or whatever, and like sets up this entire plot about other worlds and the darkness. And I feel like we should be helping with that overall plot, because bad things are happening on other universes that we are now aware of as the source world.
You want to know what's going to happen, Nika?
We should be doing something, but instead we're like,
here's what's going to happen.
Do it.
Come next expansion, when we're supposed to be invading Garlemald, when we're at the point where we're finally going to come head to head with them, and what everyone has been waiting for since Final Fantasy XIV started,
since 1.8.
Suddenly we are going to be pulled into that conflict, and we're going to look at Garlemald and be like, oh, we're going to have to team up now, bros, we're allies, and they're going to deny you and cock block you of what you've been waiting for 5 expansions to see. And it's still gonna suck.
What are we waiting for exactly?
The coming to, you know, like the final battle with Garlemald, like actually taking the fight to them. Yeah.
Is that how you think the greater overall FF14 arc is gonna end?
I don't think that we are going to defeat Garlemald, and whatever expansion it happens in. Yeah, I think that a bigger threat is going to end up emerging in some way.
And we have to combine forces like Dragon Ball Z.
Yep.
We're actually going to have a big grand, like, you don't, because the next expansion, he had hinted, you know, way back when, that we would probably be going to Garlemald.
Yeah, going to Garlemald.
Yeah,
that doesn't mean that we're going to be fighting them.
That's true, yeah. That doesn't necessarily mean that we're going to be conflicting with them. I mean,
but after all of this, with that, like, we are currently in a conflict with them.
Oh, in
everything we're doing. So you think...
In fact, have they not already hinted at the idea that not all Garlands think the same way, and some of them aren't evil?
People are their own individuals.
Exactly. So they're all, and how many times have we worked with them? Every single person we've come up against in some way, we've kind of...
Nero doesn't work with them anymore. He's like his own weirdo.
Okay,
like,
what about Hydrus? What about Hydrus?
If you look at anyone who's
ignore that because that supports my point.
Which character was Hydrus? I can't remember who that was.
The Warring Triad?
Yeah.
Who sacrificed himself to save us?
To be fair though, he only helped us because it also helped his own thing. He was also going against the higher ups and doing what he was doing.
That is exactly my point. They've already set up all of this subplot for when we go to Garlemald and we're about to strike the final blow, that we actually end up teaming up with some rebel version of them, overthrow the Emperor, defeat him, and then now we're all cool with Garlemald, and now let's go fight the big convergence.
But overthrowing the Emperor still, to me, constitutes a defeat of Garlemald. Whether or not we work with the rebel force of Garleans or not, overthrowing the Garlean Emperor means we overthrown Garlemald.
If that's going to be satisfactory for you, okay, cool.
I mean, it depends on how they play it out.
Because then it'll basically be expansion 5 of exactly what we did in Doma and in Ala Mhigo. joining up with the rebel forces.
Yeah. I don't know. It's hard to say. Like, anyone in any form of power we've ever forced in Garlemald that is still like aligned with the military is definitely on the same page. I don't think that like the people higher ups are just going to be like, oh, I'll work with you. Like, we're going to have to defeat a lot of
King of Raven says in the chat, overthrow isn't enough, burn all of them.
I mean, that would be kind of awesome.
But I mean, we know, like, we have Lucia, right, who works with Amaric. Like, she's cool. Like, you can't just burn all of them.
Burn them all.
And Sid, do you want to burn
them all?
I mean, that would be a really interesting plot point where
we can't lose Sid. He's
you see the heavy persecution of former Garlemald natives.
In fact, no, you want to know what would really bring me back into the fold?
I would be very interested to see that.
Is we get to that point where, okay, we've defeated Garlemald. We don't have to burn them all, but because of the people that we've put into power in Doma and in Alamigo, they have the final say. And you know what they decide? Nah, fuck it. Burn them all. And it actually sets up the governments that we've now helped to instill as the new tyrants.
I mean, so you're telling me Lise and Hien are going to say burn them all?
Well, first of all, they might not actually remain where they are come that time.
True, but I mean, Hien's pretty established. Lise, maybe not, but I feel like that's
not just them, but the fucking what's his name, the midget guy down in Old get all of the old Eorzean states involved in the decision, and it's a hard decision, but they make the wrong decision and end up becoming the new tyrants. I think that's a really interesting.
They're never going to do something like that.
No, they wouldn't. We're just telling them how to save their game.
Yeah, I know. Let's go to our phone lines, and by the way, you can give us a call and let us know